Hey guys, so Hebrews 8 had ended by saying, in speaking of a new covenant, Jesus, he makes the first one obsolete, and what is becoming obsolete and growing old is ready to vanish away. And immediately as we enter into chapter 9, it's where we really get deeper into these Old Testament connections. So if you haven't read Exodus, Leviticus, Numbers, and Deuteronomy in a while, this is a very relevant section to those. It says, now even the first covenant had regulations for worship and an earthly place of holiness. For, and this is where it does all the job for me explaining everything, for a tent was prepared, the first section, in which were the lampstand and the table and the bread of the presence, and it is called the holy place. And behind the second curtain was a second section called the holy place, the most holy place, or what we sometimes refer to as the Holy of Holies, having the golden altar of incense and the Ark of the Covenant covered on all sides with gold, in which was a golden urn holding the manna, that is the bread that fell out of heaven in the wilderness, and Aaron's staff that budded, which was a whole event that proved Aaron's priesthood before God, and the tablets of the covenant, which were held within the ark also. Above it were the cherubim of glory, overshadowing the mercy seat. And of these things we cannot now speak in detail. If you want to read about them, you have almost 100 chapters between Exodus and Deuteronomy. There is a lot of content, which is why he says we cannot now speak in detail. But these preparations having thus been made, the priests go regularly into the first section, performing their ritual duties. But into the second, only the high priest goes, and he but once a year, and not without taking blood, which he offers for himself and for the unintentional sins of the people. And notice it says the priests go regularly into the first section, and the high priest goes into the second section. And this is because we see evidence now in Hebrews of it being written before 70 AD, so it being an earlier letter. This just being another example of it, this present tense language in referring to the sacrifices that take place in the temple, which he offers for himself and for the unintentional sins of the people. And by this, the Holy Spirit indicates that the way into the holy place is not yet opened as long as the first section is still standing, which is symbolic for the present age, which is interesting because it's no longer standing. It's not there. After 70 AD, we know the temple was destroyed, that the Romans destroyed the temple, and ever since then, it hasn't existed because Jesus got rid of the sacrificial system. His sacrifice was the ultimate once for all sacrifice, which is what Hebrews is all about. And so this is interesting because it's written in a time before those sacrifices ended, but now we see, hey, it's not even an issue anymore because it's not even possible, at least not the way that it was instituted in the Old Covenant. And according to this arrangement, gifts and sacrifices are offered that cannot perfect the conscience of the worshiper, but deal only with food and drink and various washings, regulations for the body imposed until the time of Reformation. You know, they could kind of act as a substitute in a sense, but not really. They didn't perfect the conscience. They didn't make our hearts right before God. They didn't give us a heart of flesh. They didn't give us a new spirit. That's what's unique to the new covenant. But when Christ appeared as a high priest of the good things that have come, then through the greater and more perfect tent, not made with hands, that is, not of this creation, he entered once for all into the holy places, not by means of the blood of goats and calves, but by means of his own blood, thus securing an eternal redemption, that is, a redemption for us. For if the blood of goats and bulls and the sprinkling of defiled persons with the ashes of a heifer sanctify for the purification of the flesh, how much more will the blood of Christ, who through the eternal Spirit offered himself without blemish to God, purify our conscience from dead works to serve the living God? And notice that the goal of it is to purify our conscience from dead works so that we can serve the living God. It's more than just a mental affirmation. It is living out a changed life, going from the dead works of ritualistic religious life to a pure, undefiled religion, like James says. You know, it's not, I hate the phrase, it's a relationship, not a religion. Like, yes, the relationship's the most important part, but baked into that relationship is the religion that God set in place, which is the Christian faith, which is pure and undefiled religion is this, to visit the widow and the orphan. Like, these are also realities. We shouldn't undermine that we have a God of order who set things in place in a specific order, and that there is religion baked into it. We have orderly conduct. That's the whole point of 1 Corinthians 14. And so that's important. But also, you see a lot of people who are so excited because of eschatological beliefs, mostly premillennial dispensationalism, essentially the idea of like, oh, we believe in a rapture, right? Like that type of mindset. You very often see this idea of, oh, what about a third temple? What about when this comes up? And even in churches that I know and love, get very excited about this idea of a third temple and like, oh, look, they're worshiping there. And yes, we can be excited eschatologically, saying, hey, these might be signs of the times of things falling into place eschatologically. But at the same time, we should never find joy and excitement just in the rebuilding of a temple or a reinstatement of temple sacrifice, because ultimately that's exactly what Hebrews is talking against. It should burden our spirits that there are people who feel like they need to offer these sacrifices continually, ultimately blaspheming Christ and his sacrifice, not knowing that he offered himself up once for all for us, and that is sufficient, and that's what we need everyone to seek out. And so it says, therefore, he is the mediator of a new covenant, so that those who are called may receive the promised eternal inheritance, since a death has occurred that redeems them from the transgressions committed under the first covenant. For where a will is involved, the death of the one who made it must be established. For a will takes effect only at death, since it's not in force as long as the one who made it is alive. Therefore, not even the first covenant was inaugurated without blood. I mean, even God making a sacrifice before Adam and Eve, before both of them, giving them the skin of the animal to cover them, he had a sacrifice. Even from the very beginning, you see the need for blood atonement because the wages of sin is death. For when every commandment of the law has been declared by Moses to all the people, he took the blood of calves and goats with water and scarlet wool and hyssop and sprinkled both the book itself and all the people, saying, this is the blood of the covenant that God commanded for you. And in the same way he sprinkled with the blood both the tent and all the vessels used in worship. Indeed, under the law, almost everything is purified with blood, and without the shedding of blood, there is no forgiveness of sins. Again, the wages of sin is death. We need to really take that in to understand the purpose of Christ's sacrifice. So thus it was necessary for the copies of the heavenly things, that is, the things that the workers who built off of what Moses saw, what they were actually based off of in heaven, it was necessary for the copies of those heavenly things to be purified with these rites. But the heavenly things themselves with better sacrifices than these. For Christ has entered not into the holy place made with hands, which are copies of the true things, but into heaven itself, now to appear in the presence of God on our behalf. Nor was it to offer himself repeatedly, as the high priest enters the holy places every year with blood not his own, for then he would have had to have suffered repeatedly since the foundation of the world. But as it is, he has appeared, and this is the key, once for all, at the end of the ages, to put away sin by the sacrifice of himself, as the perfect spotless lamb. And just as it is appointed for man to die once, there's no reincarnation. It says here, Hebrews 9:27, it is appointed for man to die once, and after that comes judgment. There is the judgment of the dead, Daniel 12 says, some to everlasting life, some to everlasting contempt and shame. And so Christ, having been offered once to bear the sins of many, will appear a second time, not to deal with sin, but to save those who are eagerly waiting for him. And so, yes, there's good works. There is also that eager expectation and waiting. Christ is coming for those who long for him, who love him, and are waiting for him.